There's so much that we can do in post nowadays that it really does feel limitless sometimes, but even with how far things have come and how much you can do in post, when it comes to my films, I'm still a big believer in doing everything that you can in camera, then building on that in post. And there are some techniques that have been around since the inception of film that are still great in-camera techniques to help tell your story, like the two we're talking about today, undercranking and overcranking. These terms originated in the early days of cinema when the film inside the camera had to be manually sent through the gate by turning a lever on the side or cranking. The slower you turn it, undercranking, the less frames you're going to get and the faster the motion will be. Conversely, the quicker you turn it, overcranking, the more frames per second you're going to get through the camera and the slower your motion will be. To put it plainly, what we're talking about today here is slow and fast motion effects. I have a list of my ideas to try here, mostly focusing on undercranking, since it's a technique that's criminally underused in my opinion, including by me. But first up, let's take a look at some uses in action films. I'd guess that the majority of action films utilize undercranking to some extent, sometimes done in post, but more often in camera. We could look at a more obvious example here with Mad Max Fury Road. George Miller used it to heighten the style, but it also gives a much more intense feeling overall. For a less obvious example, you can look at pretty much any action scene. With these, the frame rates are placed slightly lower at 22 or 20 frames per second, and you're accelerating all your performers' movements for a much more exciting sequence. And if you're curious, the app that I'm in right now is called Producer, which is also today's partner. This is a production workflow tool, which won NAB's Product of the Year for 2023. You have your tabs here with development, pre-production, production, post-production, and delivery, and as you hover over each, you get the different elements of each of these stages in production. It works for short films, commercial work, music videos, corporate, anything like that where you need to collaborate. And for this shoot, the mood board and the storyboard were especially useful. I was able to grab what I wanted to try and place examples in the mood board, then the shots I wanted to get in the storyboards, like this action moment here with undercranking a fight scene, which we can look at right now. And first, we have this move at 24 frames per second. It's a simple block and punch, and if we shift our frame rate lower to 20 frames a second, the move becomes much faster and more violent. It may be a bit too much here. It definitely is if we go to 18 frames per second, but if we pull back to 22 frames, we still get that heightened, more violent sense without it being obvious at all. And I know what a lot of you will say, why not speed it up in post? Why bake it into the shot? Well, when you speed something up in post, your editor is removing frames to achieve that speed, which can lead to unpleasant jumps in your shot, especially when handheld, which we can look at here. If we speed the 24 frames per second shot to match the 20, you can see the difference. The shot that is sped up in post has an unpleasant jerky quality due to those random missing frames and the lack of additional motion blur that would come with that speed, while the undercranked feels more smooth and organic with the additional motion blur since we have our shutter at 180 degrees, which means of course you double your frame rate for the shutter speed. So 24 frames per second, we're at 1/48th of a second on that shutter, and at 20 frames per second, we're at 1/40th. So you're introducing more of that blur, which does help overall. But an even better way to illustrate the effect is this shot here. How much the undercranking smooths out my handheld motion gives it such a unique feel. And of course, shaking the camera once we get close has that amazingly heightened vibe as well. It reminds me of the effect from Logan. And many of you will recognize the Sam Raimi quality of the undercranking too, including some monster POV shots like you see in The Evil Dead. But it can work for more basic invisible things as well, like slightly boosting the speed for a character running, which really only works with slightly undercranked, like 22 frames per second. Much more than that, and it's a bit too obvious. Moving along to another great use, which is this one here, increasing the perceived speed of a vehicle. And again, we're looking at Producer right now, which I did use for production on this episode, and I do like the idea of using it for Film Riot a lot more, but normal episodes of Film Riot are a different beast, so not everything in here would be used. However, I really wish I would have had this for my last short film, and even a recent episode of Film Riot we did with Canon, where we rented a location and worked with our DP friend Daniel Ruth. And I already showed before how I used the mood board and storyboard to build out what shots we'd be doing. But the cool thing here is that when I jump into pre-production and the shot list, all the shots automatically populate here. I can reorder them, set estimated time on how long they will take, and so on. In the rest of pre-pro, we have places to add in your crew and cast. And inside of cast, Producer has already made a few for me here since I added them into the shots and the storyboard storyboard. Then if you move down to your shooting schedule, you see that producer has already added in the shots since everything here is interconnected and working with each other. But of course, we can move these around to start shaping what we want our day to be. Then in production, we have our shoot day. Here we get this very simple tool to create our call sheet, a selection for our team once we have it, and our shooting schedule. And it all looks slick too. So many things like this look like you're working in 90s Microsoft Word, so that is a big plus for me. But the best part is you can get started for free. You can get a free account and start using this right now. There are paid accounts, of course, but what I'm currently using is the free version. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Going back over to development, we have our car shot here that we want to try next. Here we have our car in 24 frames per second. I'm just holding the camera outside the window, so we are getting some ugly flinching in our frame, so we'll have to ignore that. But if we overcrank now, we can boost the perceived speed really effectively, and we can take it pretty far too. This shot here is at 12 frames per second, and since there's no movement that would give that fact away, we're able to double the speed that the car is traveling. So this 40-mile-an-hour shot becomes an 80-mile-an-hour one. And again, the perk of overcranking here is the smoothness and that in-camera motion blur. At the lower frame rate, our shutter is slower and we are getting that extra motion blur that helps push that feeling of speed a lot. Everything that we've shown so far is trying to hide that we're shooting at a lower frame rate, but there are some techniques where making it loud and clear is why you would do it, like some effects that you've seen from music videos, like this moment that we have shot at 24 frames per second.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it, ayy. I'm making moves like every day. I'm making moves like every day.
But if we take that song into Premiere, slow it down by 50%, then set our frame rate to 12 frames per second, we can record our actor performing the song at a slower speed like this.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I
And since he performed it at half speed while we shot it at double, in post we put it all together and get this.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it, ayy.
And we can go the opposite direction. Speed our song up to 200%, then set our frame rate to 48 frames per second, and have Josh lip sync like it was an Eminem song.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it, ayy. I'm making moves like every day. I'm making moves like every day.
And again, once we put that together in post with the song back at its proper speed, we have this.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it, ayy. I'm making moves like every day. I'm making moves like every day.
We are shooting this with our motion control slider, which is the Kessler Cineshooter. Motion control here allows me to be precise and get multiple passes for that effect. And that's why I'm doing it here, multiple identical passes. So I can film Josh and Justin twice, once overcranked and then once undercranked, and then combine them in post to have this. Two people arguing at completely different rates of speed. And we can again organize our workflow here in Producer. Now that we are going to move to post, we can come under this tab here and see our different versions of the editing process and VFX as well. So we can come into any of these, see what we have, leave notes, draw on the video, and so on. Same goes for sound and color grading. And finally, we have delivery. So the best thing about it for me is that it is a very clean and intuitive tool to bring everything and everyone you need for your production right into one place. It's perfect for filmmakers, production companies, and companies with in-house media production. They're also in the early stages, but new features are being added often, and their plans for the tool are massive. And again, you can sign up for free and try it out for yourself, which you can find in the link in the notes below. If you do like it and want to upgrade your subscription, you can use the coupon code FilmRiot23 to get 15% off your first year. But this idea here of combining these two frame rates in one shot is exactly how they do it for those shots that you've seen where someone is in the shot and at a completely different frame rate than everyone else, which is probably most often seen in music videos. But you can also get weird with it and create odd moments of all kinds, comping things together or cutting in between things like we did with this test here, which feels perfect for some horror moments. Of course, you don't need motion control for this. I do love what the motion is giving us, but you could do this exact same thing just locked down on a tripod without any movement. So even if you're working with a cell phone and a $10 tripod, you can still do the same thing since apps like Filmic Pro let you control the frame rate on your phone. So give alternative frame rates a try, experiment, see how different uses make you feel and how they can assist in telling your story. And until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.
Work it, watch me work it. I'ma do it how I wanna when I twerk it, ayy. I'm making moves like every day. I'm making moves like every day. Hey.
See you later. Ta-ta.